With this movie, I thought it would be useful to talk a little about selections and how they relate to channels. As you can see on screen here, I've just got this blank empty file, and if I use the marquee tool in any one of its forms to click and drag out a selection, if I go to the select menu and choose save selection, it gives me the opportunity to give this a name. You don't really need to do this, but I'll call this a shape. Click OK. And if I go to select and deselect, then my selection's gone. If I need to reload that selection, I go to the select menu, choose load selection. There's my selection named shape. I click OK and I have my selection back. But how is this possible? What happens to selections and how are they stored? I'll just select and deselect. Well, you may be surprised to know, or you may not know, that selections get stored in channels, and you can see there's my saved selection. So that you can see with a selection, either something is selected or it isn't, so there's a boundary line. And that's very easy for Photoshop to recognize and save. And when we reload the selection, I can do that from here. I can do it in a number of ways. You've already seen that I can do it from the select menu by choosing load. I can hold the control key down and click on this thumbnail here, control click, and if we look at the layers palette there, we can see that the selection's loaded. I'll just deselect. Knowing that this is channel number 4, our extra channel, I can do it from the keyboard by pressing Control Alt and the number 4. That will load a selection. So when you make and save selections, they're stored as extra channels. Let me delete that channel, so now we have no selection made and stored. And let's try a similar exercise again. I'll drag out a selection. This time I'm going to feather the selection. We can do that from the select menu and choose modify and feather, but let me just show you, once you have a selection drawn, it's quicker to right click the mouse inside the selection and choose the feather option there. And let's take a feather option of, say, something like 15. Now, to all intents and purposes, visually not much has happened, but again I'll save this selection and we'll call it our shape again. I'll click OK and I'll deselect. Instead of choosing deselect from the keyboard, get used to this shortcut here, Control D. So whoops, I'll do that now, Control D. And you'll know that once it's saved into the extra channel. But if we have a look at this shape now, you can now see the feathered edge of the selection. If I zoom in, Control and plus on the keyboard, I'll hold the space bar to pan around. So that's how Photoshop creates a feathered edge. I've just got AVG popping up there, 50% off. I don't think so. Close that down. And so we can see that that's how Photoshop saves or creates a feathered edge by this tonal transition from white through tonal grades shades of grey to black there. And let's zoom back out, Control and minus on the keyboard here. And same thing goes, Control click and I load that selection. And let's go back into the layers palette proper. And this time if I fill that selection, so edit, fill, and we'll use black from this menu here. I'll deselect, Control D on the keyboard. You can see now our feathered edge coming into play, being created by our feathered selection. Okay, I'm going to unlock this layer. I'm going to double click and click OK. That means I can select everything on the layer, select all, Control A on the keyboard, and if I hit delete and deselect, Control D, we've basically just deleted all of our pixel data from the layer, and we're looking at transparency, nothing there. Again, I'll use the marquee tool to drag out a selection. I'm going to fill with the foreground colour, but this time I'll do it from the keyboard. The foreground colour would be Alt and Backspace. There we go. And if I press Control D, that drops the selection. V on the keyboard gives me my move tool, which is this tool here. And obviously I can move that around. Because we've got this shape surrounded by transparency, there is the opportunity of loading something called the transparency mask. And if I hold the control key down, move the mouse and click on the thumbnail here, so I'll control click, as you can see that loads the selection. It's known as the transparency mask for the selection there. You may ask why you'd want to do this. Well, there are many reasons why you'd want to do this during your edits, but simply I can take that. If I've got the selection tool, I can move the selection along. I can do all sorts. I can load the selection into a layer of its own, and if I Alt backspace, there we go, we've got another shape there. I'll press Control D. So it's very handy to be able to load the transparency mask from a layer as a selection, and that's something I do very often when I'm editing a file. So there's some basic information about selections, feathered selections, how they're loaded and stored into extra channels, and you'll see this information coming into play when we actually create our own channel mask based selections in a few of the following movies.